All righty. Good morning. I am Megan. Like was just said, I am the face behind Faerie Dice. It is usually just me in my little back room of my house pouring dice. Occasionally, I have my husband along on the road with me, helping me out. But today it is just me. So today we're going to be making two different types of dice, two of my favorite types. The first one that we're going to be working on is a type called Nebula. It is a two-part set. The way I make the dice themselves is in two parts. So we'll break those steps down. The second set that I'm going to be making is called Oasis Treasure. It was a spin-off of my Sunken Treasure. So instead of being like an oceany color, it's more of like a teal with pink. So it's kind of like an oasis looking thing. It's really cool. So let's talk about what the supplies you need are for making dice. The first thing that you're going to need, obviously, is your epoxy. So most epoxies come in two parts. This is what I use most of the time. It is called Art and Glow. Looks like this. The first part you need is the hardener. The second part you need is the resin. These both have, they're obviously both chemicals, so they need to be handled using gloves. So that's the next thing I'm going to talk about, gloves. I did not wear gloves the first 20 times I poured dice, and I do have more sensitive skin, but because I wasn't wearing gloves, I started to get rashes on my hands every single time I would use the epoxy at all. And so I would have to thoroughly wash my hands over and over for a good 15 minutes after I poured dice, just because I wasn't protecting my skin. So I highly, highly recommend gloves anytime that you're working with epoxy. I use nitrile, just plain black gloves. After that, you're going to want some mix-ins, unless you want basic clear dice, which are cool in their own right. But today we're going to be using a couple different things. The first thing that we're going to be using is called alcohol ink. Alcohol ink is what gives our dice their color without making it opaque. So alcohol ink acts as a colorant, but keeps the dice pretty clear. Today we're going to be using three different colors. In the Nebula, we'll just be using plain black. In our Oasis Treasure, we'll be using two different colors called Pool and Aqua. They look like that. So they're pretty tiny little bottles. You don't really need very much. All right. You will also need, well, you don't really need it, but I like it, glitter. So I like solar color dust because it doesn't sink in resin. A lot of like standard grade glitter sinks to the bottom because it's heavy, and it just kind of slowly settles as the resin cures. Solar color dust makes lines of glitter that are so thin that when you open the bottles, they kind of just go, like they explode everywhere. That's how thin they are. That's how tiny those particles of glitter are. So it doesn't sink in your resin, which means you have a glitter effect throughout the entire dice, which is awesome. So today we're going to be using two different types of glitter from solar color dust. The first type is their ethereal dust. So we're going to be using two different colors. The first one is called Luminous, and the second one is called Aerial. Luminous and Aerial will both be in our Nebula, and Aerial will be in our Oasis. All right, the second type of glitter that we'll be using from Solar Color Dust is called Rainbow Candy Flakes. Now, Rainbow Candy Flakes are they're not glitter per se. They're like shards of super thin iridescent foil. So it looks like this. And if I flip it, you can kind of see what I'm talking about. They're very, very thin, little tiny flakes of iridescent foil. So they work really well. We're going to be using two different colors. In our Nebula, we'll use Sugar Floss, which is kind of this like pretty blue to pink shift color. And in our Oasis Treasure, we're going to be using Bubblegum, which is this pink to like yellowy shifting foil. So there's that one. My brain just totally forgot what I was doing. All right. Some other things that you can add in are little foil flakes. So these are just like Mylar foil that you can find at your party stores to wrap presents. This is like a bigger piece of it. It acts as like a shiny agent within the dice. So if you crumple it up, and this is why I have it in small pieces, if you crumple it up in these small pieces and throw it into your dice, you actually get this like really reflective shine back at you from inside the dice. So that's what I'm going to be putting in both sets today. The last thing that I'm going to be using in our Oasis Treasure is gold foil. So this is our gold foil sheet. It's a pain in the butt once it sticks to things. but it's really pretty inside dice. So we're gonna go ahead and use those today. I'm gonna go ahead and get my gloves on, and then we can talk about the next steps. You'll also need something to measure with because our resin is a 1-to-1 mix. So you need 1 part hardener, 1 part resin. And you want to keep that ratio just because if you go over or under, there's a chance that your dice won't harden correctly. And I do actually have quite a few squishy dice because I didn't add enough or it wasn't cured enough, and it's a whole pain in the butt to get it to work. All right, I'm going to try to get your chat up. For some reason, it doesn't want to be my friend. So let me try on my phone. Just in case you guys have any questions or need a little bit more explanation or I'm going too fast. I am a teacher by trade, and my kids always tell me, Miss Garner, you're going way too fast. I don't know what you're saying. So let me go ahead and get back to that channel so I can see if you guys have any questions. My iPad died, so just like I thought it would. All right, watch the streams. Here we go. So I can see if you guys have any questions. Okay, so the next thing that you're going to need is just something to measure. So I like to use these silicone cups because they have measuring milliliters on the side, but they also can be washed super easily. So I'm going to go ahead and pour out 20 milliliters of hardener. I start with the hardener just because it's a lot easier to mix in with the hardener. And I'm actually going to tilt you guys down so you can see what I'm doing at this point. There's not a lot going on my face. There's a lot more going on down here. So I'm going to go ahead and pour out 20 milliliters of hardener. And that's about to this line there. Good. Now the 20 milliliters of hardener is going into one of these clear plastic cups. These clear plastic cups will act as our mixing area. So we can make sure that everything is thoroughly mixed. I would say mixing is probably the most boring part of making dice because it takes a while. You have to mix for like 5 minutes and then transfer to another cup and mix more. All right, so there's our first set. I'm going to go ahead and get my second set as well. Now this one, I'm actually going to be doing 2 parts, like I said. So this is going to have black and this is going to have clear. So I'm going to do about 5 milliliters, if I move this for you, about 5 milliliters of hardener because I don't need very much black. Okay, let me make sure that that's correct amount. Let me add just a smidge more. I didn't hit that line like I thought I was going to. All right. All right, perfect. So we're going to put some in here. There's that. And for my last step, I'm also going to be putting 15, excuse me. Can't do math in my head. 15 milliliters in here for the clear. All right, there we go. Perfect. Now today I'm also going to be making some super cute little silicone mold runes actually, and I'll show you those just in a second. I just got this new mold from Moon's Mold on Instagram and on Etsy. It is so cute. It's just tiny little runes. And I do eventually plan to put these inside dice. So that will be really fun. Let me go ahead and show you that. It's literally still in the packaging. I just got it. Here we go. Wow, gloves and plastic don't go well together. I'm so sorry for those of you who don't like the sound of plastic. That is horrible. Oh my gosh. Okay, so the little cute little molds look like this. It's super tiny, and it's got little runes on the inside. I don't know if you guys can see those, but it's so cute, and I cannot wait to cast them and put them inside dice. So here are my 2 colors for my Nebula set, and here's my 1 color for my Oasis set. So we're going to go ahead and get started on the Nebula set first. So I'm going to take that 5 milliliters of hardener that I grabbed, or that I poured, and I'm going to go ahead and put black alcohol ink inside of it. So in that black alcohol ink, you really don't need very much because if you drop in too much, your dice are going to get squishy from the amount of alcohol ink inside, and black kind of takes over very quickly. So I'm going to start with 1 drop, and as you can see, it kind of already spread out and is all over the place. You don't need very much. And I'm going to go ahead and mix that in. Now, the reason that I mix all of my colorant and all my glitters in before I pour the resin is because when you put the resin inside of the hardener, you actually only have a 45-minute working time as soon as they hit. So you have to mix and get all of your resin inside your molds before the 45 timer is up. And so if I'm taking time to like figure out what color I want, if this is too much or too little, I'm wasting some of that 45 minutes. So I put the color in prior to mixing my 2 parts. So here's the black. I'm actually going to add just 1. No, I'm not. This is pretty black. I'm not going to add more black. I think it's good where it is. And I'm actually going to get the glitter out as we speak. So let's see. Let's get that open. And because this is such fine glitter, you really don't need very much. I'm going to just be using this tiny little dowel to take some glitter out and put it in there. And then hopefully you guys will be able to see when it's mixed what it looks like. So let's go ahead and get that in. So again, like you really don't need very much. That's too much. And if I dump that in, just a tiny bit more, you'll get to see. I'm going to set this to the side just because I don't know if I need more or not yet. Mix that in. And then hopefully you guys can see like how color shifting that already is with just such a small amount. All right, and then I'm going to add in that second color of glitter. I think this is a good amount of dreamy. All right, and then the second color, luminous. Okay. Here we go. Okay, so if I dump a little bit of that in, luminous is a little bit darker. It's kind of like a purple to teal shift. So it's got a lot more dark colors in it, which is really nice because if you think of a nebula, there are a lot of different colors within it. Now this is going to be a blue shift nebula. There's not going to be any oranges, but that's something to think about for the future is a fun orange or yellow shift. Now, if we look at it, there's a lot more purple, a lot more teal in there for sure. All right. Now we are going to add the sugar floss, the rainbow candy flakes, this one here. This is the one that if you open it, you really need to not breathe in or breathe out because the flakes are so thin, they will fly everywhere. So I'm going to be very careful, and I apologize, but I'm going to stay silent for about a minute just because this stuff will like blow everywhere. Okay, now that the lid is back on there. This is not the kind of glitter you like want to breathe near for sure. If you sneeze, it goes everywhere in the air. All right, and so I'm going to mix that in, and then you guys will be able to see. So as you can see, those chunks are a lot bigger. They're very pretty. It's kind of hard to see, but definitely in person, these look crazy shiny, which is always fun. All right, so there's our black done. We're going to set this aside. It's done. All we have to do is now mix it with the resin. The second part, this is just the clear for it. Now, I don't want it to just be boring clear, so I'm going to go ahead and mix in glitter. I'm going to be using the same color glitters, and you'll get to see the difference between the black and what it looks like on clear. These kind of glitters work really well. Oh, wow, that's really hard to open. These kind of glitters work really well for black items because it stands out so much more. They're technically called inference powders. They shift colors depending on what way you look at them. But when you put them on black, it's so much more strikingly beautiful just because that black helps it stand out a lot more. So you'll be able to see the difference in the clear versus the black. Not to say that it's not pretty in the clear, it for sure is, but in the black, it's a lot more striking. All right, so let's get those in there. I'm surrounded by glitter. I'm pretty sure the inside of my lungs are coated in glitter, but hey, if that's how I die, at least it was a sparkly death. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and mix those glitters in there. So still gorgeous, but you can definitely tell the difference. It's probably a lot harder for you guys to see in the clear than it is in the black. But it has a lot more green shift right now. than it does in the black. So let me add in that sugar floss. I'm not going to breathe just because it will get everywhere. And done. Okay, great. And let's mix that in. Perfect. So that one is now done. So those are my two parts for this color of dice, the nebula dice. We've got the black and we've got the clear. Now this time I'm putting a little less black than I did in my original sets. When I did the original sets, I did a lot more black, and because I did so much black, there wasn't enough room for the effect to really take place. So I am going to make sure that this time I put more clear, so you get more of a nebula effect than you do with the original ones I did, which were still pretty, but whatever. All right, so those are the two colors for that. I'm going to set them aside. Now I'm going to do the second color dice that we're making. This is just one standard color. We're going to be working with those two alcohol inks. Like I said, we've got Pool and Aqua. We're going to start with Aqua because it is the lighter color. And so we are going to drop some of that in there. If it wants to cooperate. Oh, it's clogged. Cool. Oh no. There we go. All right. So it's a very, very light aqua color. It's just barely there. So I'm going to add just a bit more. Okay. That. I'll mix that in. So I think that's a good base, a very light aqua. I want to add a little bit more depth to it. So I'm going to add in that darker Pool color, which is like aqua, very similar, but it's a lot darker. So I only need a couple drops of it to darken this up. I would say probably about 2. And then we can go from there. Okay, so this turned it a lot more green. That's interesting the way that those reacted. Still very nice looking though. All right. I'm actually going to add a little bit more aqua. I think I liked it when it was a little bit more blue and less green. This is the joy of dice making. You literally can just keep messing with it until you think this is the right color. Or if you're like, well, this is good enough, this is good as it's going to get, let's quit there. Cool. But when you put it in the pressure pot and then you demold it later, you're like, well, that's not what I was expecting. That is the joy of dice making. Okay, I think that's a pretty good color. Like an aqua-y, more like turquoise almost. Okay, now we're gonna add the glitter to these. So remember we said we we're gonna do one of the solar color dust in Ariel. I'm gonna open that up, that forward. All right, and then, ooh, glitter everywhere. The second one is our candy floss, and this one is the bubblegum color. So this will give it a pink shift, which always looks fun, and teal. All right, close that up. Good to go. Okay, let's get those mixed in so you can see. Okay. I think that looks awesome. Very nice. Okay. So here comes the most boring part. Now that we've got our hardeners colored and we're ready to start mixing, each mix takes about 5 minutes. So it is kind of a long process. And then you have to dump it into another cup to make sure that you've got all of it completely mixed. So there is quite a bit of time that is involved in this. Before we get to the mixing, I do want to show you my molds because right after mixing, that's what comes next. So I'm going to lift the screen up just a little bit so you can see this better. But this is how I put my molds in my pressure pot. This allows me to get 4 sets of molds in my pressure pot, whereas before I was only getting 2. So about this dividing line right about here, this is 2 separate sets. On the top layer, there's a set here, and there's a set here. So these are going to be the sets that we're using. The bottom ones we're going to ignore for now. They're just staying there so that they don't get lost. But we don't have time to make 4 sets. That would take way too long. All right, so back to what we were doing. So I'm going to go ahead and get out my silicone cups, and I'm going to pour resin. Now, it has to be in equal parts because it is a 1-to-1 ratio. So we're going to go ahead and start with the black color because that is the color that we're pouring on the bottom of our molds. So we're going to get about 5 milliliters of that because that's what we originally poured. Now, resin pours super slowly. It's a very thick product. So we have to be careful not to over pour. So that's actually perfect. I just blobbed in just the right amount. Okay, so I am now going to put this in here and I have to stir for 5 minutes. This would be the best time to ask me any questions. I'm going to tilt the camera back up to my face. If you have any questions for me, I am happy to answer them because this is like the most boring part of it. You're literally just sitting there stirring. We'll talk about why it's important to stir for the full time in just a second, but let me get this resin in here so we can get a going. I don't have all the time in the world to spend with you as much as I would love. These dice have to be in the pressure pot within 45 minutes. So I've got to make sure they are good to go. All right, scoop the sides, get all the extra. Perfect. Now, when I mix, it's really important to pay attention to the color as you're mixing. You can see when I start to mix, it's no longer clear. That means that the two parts are not completely mixed together. So it's really, really important to mix until it is clear. If it's not clear, you're going to have some funky, like squishy / unhardened / uncured parts. So it's really important to make sure you're curing all of those. All right, so at this point, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. I'm going to be literally just stirring and talking at the same time. But I am going to set a timer so that I do not forget. Alexa, please set a 4-minute timer.
Second timer.
Great.
4 minutes.
Second
Starting
timer.
now.
What's the first timer? I don't know what it is. All right. So let's go ahead. Again, if you have any questions, great. If not, I'm just going to sit here and stir in silence, I guess. There's not much else to do when you are stirring. Could talk about other dice-related things. Let's see. Dice-related things. Just make sure your working area is clean of dog hairs. I have a dog and a cat, and they both seem to shed around my work area, meaning I have fur in my dice sometimes. It's great to unmold a die and then look at it and be like, oh, cool, my dog's been here. Fabulous. All right. So mixing is the most boring part. You're just sitting here watching this. How do you add items to your dice? So we're actually going to talk about that in just a second with our foil. It would kind of be the same thing with the foil. You want to make sure that it's completely coated in the resin before you put it in your mold. Like little trinkets. So let's say you have like a tiny skull or something like a bead that you want to use, right? You want to make sure that it's completely coated in resin before putting it into your mold. That way, when you sink it in, there's no funny bubbles or air gaps that would happen if you had just pushed it in. Pretty simple. As long as it can fit in a mold, it can go inside a dice. But the problem is if it's not made out of the same resin that you are working with, there is a possibility that it will unbalance the dice because sometimes those little trinkets that you add in are not the same weight as the resin. So you could end up with a weighted dice, which for some people isn't a problem. I mean, if you want a weighted dice, at least weight it on the one side so you roll a 20 most times. But it is something to be aware of if you do plan to use it as a fair set of dice. Is the stirring process always the same length of time? No, sometimes it can be 5 minutes, sometimes it's 4 minutes. It really depends on how much resin I'm mixing. I'm doing a shorter amount of time because I don't have as much resin to mix. Usually I do 5 minutes for my full batches. But you have, the stirring time is typically 3 to 5 minutes based on what your resin asks for. I am going to be starting a new resin use later, I guess. I'm switching resin brands just to try it out. And that one actually has a 3-minute stir. And it says don't mix past 8 minutes or you could cause the curing to happen. And I was like, well, guess I'm not mixing as much as I'd like to. Watching this has been cathartic. Oh, I'm glad. I think making dice is really cathartic for sure. I suffer from anxiety. And I've been like going to therapy for a while, but this has been such a help. You're literally just doing repetitive process over process. So there's nothing like that's new about it, I guess. It's not something that is going to change, I guess. You're mixing, you're putting it in the molds, you're pulling those out, and you're fixing them up. But obviously there are some surprises, I guess, when you pull out dice that you didn't expect to turn out the way they did. Last week I did a community set where I let everybody on my Instagram pick what colors and what I was putting inside of them. And they were supposed to be teal with a hint of purple, and they ended up literally just being purple with like the teeniest top of teal, which was awesome. But it just goes to show you that dice making always isn't exactly what you expect. To suspend those items in the middle of the die. There is a way to suspend items in the middle of the die, but it is a two to 3 day process. The first thing you have to do is pour a first layer of resin. Hold my timer. Alexa, stop. All right, here, I will get back to your question in just a second. But now I'm going to pour this into a brand new cup to make sure I've got everything. I'm going to tilt you down for just a second, and then I will stir this for about a minute more, and then answer your question thoroughly. Thoroughly? I don't know. That didn't sound right. I'm a teacher, but it's been like 3 weeks since I've taught anything, so my brain is forgetting words. All right. So get that out. Make sure I've got all the sides scraped. And put it in the new cup and stir. Okay, so I'm just going to stir it for another extra minute just to make sure that it's fully mixed while answering your question. So suspending things. You want to do one layer of resin and then let it cure fully. Well, not necessarily fully. Probably within like, let's say if it's a 24-hour cure, you want about probably 12 hours. You want it to be pretty solid, but enough to still kind of mix. So you let that cure, and then while it's curing, you're going to put whatever trinket you want to put inside the dice inside that resin that's already super tacky or almost cured, pretty much. That will make sure that it doesn't sink, because the resin's already curing. So you want to make sure that that's already kind of got a layer to it. Once that's in there, you can go ahead and pour the second layer of resin on top to thoroughly coat it. And I would recommend, like I said, to coat whatever you're putting inside the dice before. That way it's thoroughly coated prior to. So then you go ahead and pour that second layer, and you can cure it fully, and then you've got your trinket in there without letting it sink. I hope that answers your question well. Where do I get the molds? So you can buy molds on Etsy. They're expensive. They're usually in the 100 range. But what I can tell you is your silicone to make molds, the one that I use in specific, I use Smooth On Sorta Clear 12. That cost me roughly $37 for 2 full sets of molds to make. Obviously, it's a lot more time consuming because you have to make the molds yourself. And I'll show you what mine look like right now because I need to pull them out. You have to make the molds yourself. So it is a little bit more time consuming, but you get to pick what dice literally go into that mold. So here are my molds, and I'm going to tilt you down so you can see them. Here are my molds. I use squish molds. That means, and they're really dirty because they're kind of old. That means there is a top that squishes down into the actual mold to create the top face. This is essentially just an open face mold with a top. Open face mold means you have a mold that looks like this, that has one face with no number. This allows, oh, there's something on my mold, get off. This allows air to escape, but it doesn't create that top number. So squish mold, go ahead, kind of gets rid of that issue. You push it down, and then you've got your top number, which is pretty awesome in my opinion. A lot of people don't like squish molds because they can be temperamental, but I think that they're my favorite, to be totally honest. Sprue molds are essentially like molds where you have one single, like, you call it a sprue or a bent at the top, and then you have to like sand that off. And I think I've sent an X-Acto knife into my finger way too many times using those ones because I always try to rush getting the sprue off. So this is my favorite way of doing it. All right, so these are a full 7-set molds. We're going to go ahead and pour in a small layer of black to start. We do not need to put any foil in yet That part comes when we do the clear. So I'm going to pull the tops off of these to get them ready so that I know, hey, there's no silicone, or not silicone, my goodness, there's no resin inside of these. I'm going to pull these. Perfect. Awesome. There we go. So there's a full 7 set. And I'm actually going to pull an extra D20 because why not? It's never a bad thing to have an extra D20. Since I have my extra molds here, let me find it very quickly. Of course, it would be the one that's in like the very back, and I can't find it. There it is. Okay, so I'm going to do an extra D20. All right, so this is now 8 molds, but it should work out just the same. So I'm going to go ahead and take that resin, and I'm going to do a small layer of it on the bottom. So here is how we do that. Now to portion out how much I'm doing, I use my stirring stick to go ahead and just kind of lift some and then drizzle it in there. And I'm going to tilt it so you guys can see what it looks like when it's drizzled in. So it really is just like a tiny layer on the bottom. I don't want very much black. Too much black, it will kind of convolute what these dice are supposed to look like. So I'm going to do a small layer. I'm going to take the top and I'm going to flip it upside down. This is just my way of reminding myself, you put resin in that, and then I'm going to set it to the side. Do the same thing with this one. Now this is a D4 mold, so you really don't need very much because it already is a small dice. So just a tiny bit in there. Put it to the side. Next one. All right, this is a D20 as well, so you do need more resin because it's a bigger void inside there. That way, the quickest way is to just kind of pour it in there using your stir stick to guide how much you want. There's that. There we go. All right. So the next step after we do this, because I am nearly done with this part, is to go ahead and mix that clear. Now I'm going to mix it pretty quickly because we are going to run out of time if I take my sweet time talking, which I tend to do. And I want to make sure you guys get to see those Oasis set made. If we run out of time, I'll finish up on my Instagram live, but I don't want to detract from anybody else who wants to see the next Twitch stream. All right, there's all the black. I do have an extra little bit of black left over, so I'm actually just going to take that and I'm going to fill in some of these runes, which are really tiny, so they really don't need very much. But it allows me to use all that excess resin. I don't like resin waste because obviously that's money out of my pocket that I'm not wasting. All right, these are going to be so cute. I am so excited about these. Look at that. It allows me to use all that extra resin for sure, which is fabulous. I'm not complaining. Okay, cool. So I can set that aside now. Second step, clear resin. I have to do the same thing. So I'm going to pour 15 milliliters of resin into my mixing cup. So let me measure that out. Takes a hot second to get it to start to pour. Oh, I just realized I can't see. Nope, too short. Let's add some more. I usually work at a different workstation, but there's not enough room to set up for live views there. There we go. That's enough. Okay. Excuse me. Talking too much, I guess. It's got my throat all jacked up. Here we go. Add that in and mix. So again, if you have any questions, this is the perfect time to ask because I'm literally just sitting here mixing resin for 4 minutes. What time is it? 9:48. I should have time, hopefully. All right. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and mix. Now with the clear, you're going to be able to see it a little bit better, what I'm talking about, kind of like that strand. So right now it's clear. As soon as I start to mix, it kind of goes to like this milky, opaque color because those 2 parts are not thoroughly mixed. So you can kind of now see that it's got this opaque color to it. So we have to mix that out, essentially. Alexa, please start a 4-minute timer.
Second timer, 4 minutes.
What is the
starting
first
now?
timer? All right. So I'm going to tilt up. If you have any questions, I am free to answer because I'm literally just sitting here mixing. I don't feel like I answered that mold question very well, but let me re-answer it. So again, you can buy them for $100 on Etsy, which is fabulous if you don't have the time to make your molds. If you do have the time to make your molds, I think making your own molds is really fun. It is a bit of a process if you want to do squish molds. It usually takes me about 2 to 3 days, especially if I'm feeling lazy, just because it does take some time. So the first thing you need to know when you're making molds is that you need to have a non-sulfur-based clay to use as like your, for instance, if I was making a mold using my squish, all this area that creates the top would be sulfur clay, non-sulfur clay. I will link on the Discord where the squish mold tutorial on YouTube is. That's the same one that I use. I alter mine a little bit. I do plan to make my own, my own squish mold tutorial because I do it a little bit different than everybody else does. But it's still the same basic process. You get your master, whatever dice you want to cast, and then you I use like tiny shot glasses because then it uses less silicone. When I started, I used cups that look like this. And so I could only get like one mold set from the trial size silicone, which is about $37. And in reality, like that's still better than $100 molds that you buy online. But it still felt like a huge waste of silicone to me. So I'm using now 2-ounce shot glasses that really help with that. Where do I buy my resin? I actually bought this resin, the Art and Glow, on Amazon. It's about $100 for the gallon size. But I actually did just switch to a new resin that I'm going to be using shortly. It has a shorter pot life, which is how long you have to work with it. It's about a 30-minute pot life. So I wanted to make sure that I'm using one that has a long time, just in case I messed up in front of you guys. The Art and Glow has a 45 minutes, so I've got a little bit more working time with it for sure. But the new one I got is from Pro Marine. I actually bought it just straight from their website. So it really just depends on where you want to buy it. I think Amazon is the best place to buy, to be completely honest, because you get free shipping and it gets here quickly. To have a link for your squish molds. Yeah. So again, like I said, I will link that in the Discord. How much resin mix would you say you need for one set? I would say you use about, so 20 milliliters of hardener and about 20 milliliters of resin. So 40 milliliters in total. There's actually, if you were to buy like the full gallon size ones, there's actually like, I think I did the math one time. It's 3,800 blank amount of milliliters in a gallon. So there's 1.89 liters. So do that math. I don't like that math, but it's like 3,000 something milliliters in total. And so you get quite a few from the gallon size, but it's about 40 milliliters of resin. Do you have an issue with fumes with this resin? Do you need a well-ventilated space? I absolutely recommend using a well-ventilated space with whatever resin you're using. There's not a lot of fumes that you could smell with these, but that doesn't mean that there's not fumes for sure. So I do recommend using any resin that you're going to be using in a well-ventilated space. Some people go as far as to say use ventilators or respirator masks. If you're extremely sensitive, Alexa, stop. I am lucky enough to literally be in a really super well-ventilated room that has now more windows because I just got new windows put in, and a sliding glass door. So it allows a lot of cross breeze. But if you're working in an area in like a small apartment that doesn't have as many windows, or in a back room that doesn't have windows, I would highly, highly recommend that you use a respirator for sure. All right. Is there a good hack to avoid bubbles? I've tried blasting it with fire and sitting it in hot water, but my dice still come out super bubbly. Only bubbly on top. So it really does come down to how much you're mixing it. So I'm going to dump this into this cup and then we can talk about that. Right now, my resin is super bubbly because I've mixed it so much, but I use a pressure pot, so it doesn't really matter. If you're not using a pressure pot, you're going to probably have bubbles. There are ways to minimize how many bubbles you have, like blasting it with a torch, like you said, mixing really slowly with a wider tool. I use pretty thin stirring sticks, but you can use wider tools and that will really help. So I'm going to quickly give this a little mix just to make sure it's completely mixed through. But mixing slowly for sure. Warming your resin before using it. And no pressure pot, yeah. So one of the best ways is obviously a pressure pot, but if you don't have the funds to do that, I completely understand. They're not cheap always. But really warming your resin before, and warming your molds. I've heard that warming your molds in the oven actually really works too. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and pour this in here. I'm gonna do a small layer of clear before I put any of my pretty shiny foil in. But to be honest, that's the best way that I can say to help with the bubbles. It's really hard to get bubbles out completely. And that's part of the sucky issues with making dice. I never figured out how to get them fully bubble free without a pressure pot, to be totally honest with you. All right, so I just scrunched up a piece of foil. I dropped it in the resin to completely coat it. I want to make sure that there's no air bubbles, and then I'm going to go ahead and drop it straight in. That's literally how easy that is. So I'm going to get another piece. This piece seems a little bit too big, so I'm going to rip part off. I'm going to literally just crumple it up, drop it in, and mix it around. And drop it in. Let's see. Shadow reels. I have some friends that are dice makers in the UK that have pressure pots for super cheap. Let me, I'll actually, if you hit me up on Instagram, I can see if I can get some ideas of where you can get one. In America, like you can get one at Harbor Freight for like $60 if you use a coupon. I'm assuming and hoping that there's something similar for you in the UK. But I can ask around for sure and see if there's anything that they recommend on the cheaper side. Okay, so I'm gonna try to do this quickly because we only have 15 minutes and I need to get this done and the other set done. Like I said, if I don't get it done, which I'm assuming I won't because I'm a slow poke and I like to talk, I will finish it up on my live for sure because I already have it mixed, so I've got to finish it. All right, get that in there and fill up the rest. Now, I recommend going over the fill line because you want excess resin in there to squish out, hence the squish name, to squish out of the top so that you have excess resin in the vent. So let me get this done quickly. All right. And as promised, I promised everybody on my Instagram that there would be a very special announcement. I'll go ahead and give that now because we've got only 15 minutes left. And thank you to those of you that tuned in. It was very fun having you here while I did. I have a giveaway currently going on my page. That was a fun way to say that. It ends tomorrow. If you tuned in and you send me the code crowd control, you just, go to my Instagram and you send me just crowd control. Just type in crowd control. I will give you 10 times entries. So let's say you already entered. Well, now you've got 11 entries instead of 1 entry. So that's 10 times more likely to win it. So if you want to go ahead and do that, hit me up on Instagram. If you're not following me, it's fairiefire_dice on Instagram. You hit me up and send in crowd control. Again, you'll get 10 times the entries to that giveaway. Which is those community dice I talked about. Get in there. Those community dice I talked about earlier. So they're like a lavender with gold flake. So yeah, that's your little benefit of hanging out with me this morning or afternoon for some of you. While I get to make dice in front of you. All right. Almost done here. We've got about 15 minutes, which I think will be enough time to get those Oasis ones done if I hurry, if I stop talking as much. All right. Plus, they're only a 1 part, so it's really just got to mix and pour. All right. That in there. Pass the fill line. Fabulous. Set aside. Done. Now, with sprue molds, obviously there is a top that you have to put on. So what I like to do is make sure that it's well vented, which means like a little section of the top has been cut out for a vent. That allows excess resin to be, it's like a reservoir essentially. That allows excess resin to sink into the bottom. It acts like a vacuum almost, those bubbles that pop in the pressure pot. It allows that excess resin to take the space that the bubbles have been voided, essentially. All right, here's my last mold. I do have quite a bit left of this clear resin, which is a bummer, but also not because I get to make more runes. Yay! All right, dump that in there. Almost done. And then we can move to the oasis. Hopefully I have enough time. All righty. Now, great. Here's the fun part. Well, not really fun, but it can be fun if you think about it that way. All of my squish molds have a key to tell you which side goes where. So this one has like a little V cut out that tells me that this goes like that. Now, the best part of this is going from the opposite side of the vent. As you can see, there is a little notch cut out. This is where the extra resin kind of sits. So if you sit that key and you push it and kind of roll it towards the edge, you're gonna get some extra resin in that vent. Now you want that vent completely full. If the vent's not completely full, when those bubbles pop, there won't be any resin to fill them. So it basically will just create this big old void where you want resin. It will make your dice have a funky hole in the top. So we're gonna do that for each one of these. So the keys line up. I roll my tops towards the vent, and then I add extra resin in the vent to make sure that it is completely full. Now I always like to squish my molds down, the tops down really well, because if you don't squish them well enough, you're gonna get this funky gap where there was supposed to be a top, but the top didn't reach all the way to the bottom. And it's a nightmare to clean up. And most of the time I just don't, and it's a messed up die. That's just kind of how it goes. But if you clean it fast enough, you should be okay. You push it down hard enough. Excuse me, not clean it up fast enough. What am I talking about? All right. Trying to put molds on together and talk at the same time. Fabulous, apparently. All right, here we go. Almost done there. I am down to 13 minutes. Oh my gosh. I can do it. I'm going to be super speed. Okay, that's done. How the heck does this top go on? Nope, there we go. Figured it out. I'm a genius. I got this. Boom. So all that resin comes up to the top. And then we put it in our pressure pot little holder. Same thing with this one. Push and roll. Bubbles come to the top, add a little bit extra. All my other ones I filled full enough that I didn't have to add in a little bit extra, which is nice, but that one I did not. So that's why I said it's good to overfill them, because then you don't have to add any more. Push down, overfilled that one, so it was fabulous. Last one. Perfect. Oh, there's a big old bubble right there. So if you see big bubbles when you're putting your tops on, it's really important to pop them, because that's just one less bubble you have to worry about. All right, and then roll this one together. All right, that set is done. So I'm going to put that to the side, and I'm going to get this one started. Hopefully in the next 12 minutes I can finish it if I fly through it. But again, like I said, we still have time to talk, because I still have to mix for the specific amount of time. Like I can't jip the mixing, you know. It's not good to short change it for sure. All right. Let me get a little bit of extra in there. Perfect. That's 20. Pour it in and let's mix. If you have any questions, this would be, again, the perfect time to ask me, because I'm literally just going to sit here and mix for 4 minutes. All righty. There we go. All right, so I'm going to bring this up, and I'm going to start mixing. So, Alexa, please start a timer for 4 minutes.
Second timer, 4 minutes, starting now.
All right. I just realized how gross my workstation looks. I use this table for inking, so it's literally just covered in paint, because it's the best table for inking, because it's in the sunlight, and it looks nice when I do it. But it's covered in paint, so it looks really gross. So that's fabulous. But I mean, it's better than my resin mixing station. Usually I am at a desk that's behind me right now, and it's literally just covered in resin. All right, so if you have any questions for me, go ahead and shoot them over now. I am happy to answer them. And if you didn't have a chance to ask me on here, again, I'm more than happy to answer in Instagram. If you just send me a message, I love helping new dice makers out. If you're not a new dice maker and you see something I do that you're like, why are you doing that? Hit me up. I'll still answer that question. I don't know why I'm doing a lot of these things. I just do them out of habit, I guess. Alrighty. This is getting nice and pretty. As you can see, it's still kind of like that opaque color, so we need to make sure that we get that out. All right, we've got 10 minutes, I bet you. Let's see. I hope I can do this. While I mix, I'm actually going to get my molds all prepped. Two-hand in it. Here we go. Nope, can't do it. I cannot mix thoroughly enough. All righty. This is really sparkly. I think I added too much glitter. Psych, never too much glitter on anything. More glitter, the better. My family is so loud. My dad just got here. He's helping my husband with something today, but my gosh, they are loud. The numbers on the dice. Oh, I actually use, let me pull them over. I use these fun pens. They're by Artistro. If I'm doing like a non-metallic color, their metallic ones kind of are funky, but I like the non-metallic ones. I use those, and then I take a little bit of it's gonna sound really funny, floor cleaner. If you have ever heard of LA Awesome, it's this like beautiful purple cleaner that gets ink off super well and cleans them up really easily. So I actually take that and I clean it after. Now, if I'm doing metallic, I use a syringe that's a flat syringe, non-pokey, and then I fill my needles up. Oh my gosh, flat needle with a syringe full of ink, and then I just kind of put it in there and wipe it off. That has been my best method for metallic inks. The metallic Artistro pens, they're a little funky. They don't work quite as well as I'd like them to. Alrighty. This is almost done. I don't see any strands. I'm actually just going to dump it now and hope that this comes out well. It should. I'll just mix it a little bit extra in the other cup. Now, I originally bought those silicone mixing cups because I thought that I would be able to mix in them, per se, but I started using them and realized you can't see through them, so it's really hard to see like if it's completely clear or if there's enough glitter or ink in it. So it became really hard, and I realized, well, back to clear plastic cups, which for me really sucks because it's not sustainable, but trying to find a way that is super sustainable for dice making. Unfortunately, this is not it, but I will eventually one day find it. All right. This should be good. Plenty of room here. No. Alexa, stop. All right, I've got my molds. We're just going to power through this because we only have like 7 minutes left. Okay, so I've got my 8 molds. I always make an extra D20, and I'm going to tilt you down so you can see. I always make an extra D20 because I like having the D20s around. I think that they are my favorite of the dice because they're the biggest and they're the prettiest, but I always like to make an extra one. All right, so I'm going to pop off the tops of all of these. Now I'm putting in gold leaf like we talked about, so that's going to be the very first step. I'm going to pour a small amount of the resin in there. I'm going to take my little dowel and I'm going to snag some of this gold leaf and I'm going to like squish it in there and swirl it around. So here's my gold leaf. It is a pain if you get it on anything because it takes forever to get off and it just immediately sticks to it. Mm-hmm. But it looks good. So pour a little bit. Oh God, there's resin everywhere. What am I doing? Dab my dowel in resin so that it's got some sticky to it. Grab some gold leaf and mix it in there. I literally just kind of put it in and mix it around until I think it's broken into enough small pieces. All right, after that, I'm going to do the same thing with my foil. Take a piece, crumple it up, pour it in. Make sure it's coated, pour. So that one didn't want to go in there. How rude. And then set it aside. Now this is one of the simpler ones to make, but it looks really pretty because, oh no, I got resin everywhere. It's got this really pretty color to it. Okay, set it aside. That one's done. Next one, D4. So again, you really don't need very much with the D4. So I'm going to put just a tiny bit in there to start. Add my gold leaf. Way too much gold leaf. Smush it around. And then add my foil. Now there was one time where I used to, instead of squishing it around and putting it in there, I would basically just take my gold leaf and squish it in here. But I realized that that was making a huge mess and I really didn't want to do that anymore. So I stopped doing that. I'm just doing it like this now. I feel like I can control where the gold leaf goes a lot better. 5 minutes. All right, here we go. My gosh, power through. Of course, I'm in. Gold leaf. Oh my gosh. See, this gold leaf is so temperamental. It never wants to leave. Ah. Get off. Squish it in there. All right. Foil. I'm going to put 2 pieces because this one's a little bit bigger and needs to fill up the space. Drop it in. Squish. And fill it. Alrighty, 3 molds down, 5 to go. This is our D20, so it does take a little bit more. Get my gold leaf. Oh, I need more gold leaf than that. This is a big die. Okay. There we go. Get some foil. 3 minutes. I don't think I'm going to have time to finish these. I thought I could do it, but I can't. Bummer. But like I said, I'll finish these up on my live. You do have 15 minutes in between, so hopefully you guys tune in there. If not, I hope you enjoyed this very fun dice making tutorial. And again, if you didn't get your answered question, oh my gosh, your answered question? Really, Megan? You're a genius. You didn't get your question answered. Feel free to message me on Instagram. I'm happy to answer there. Okay, mix that in. Foil. There we go. Get that inside the mold. Push, push, push. Set aside. Next one. All right, a little bit. Gold leaf. That's a lot of gold leaf, but we're doing it. Why not? Each dice is going to be completely different from the last. That's the fun thing about dice making is you're not always going to get the same thing. I write down recipes of like specific colors and they still always end up looking different. All right, 2 minutes. You know what? I may be actually able to do this. Put some more in there. Yeah, get all those in there. Go. Squish. All right. So one last mold, and then yeah, I think we're almost there. Okay, so like I said, if you have any questions, please hit me up on Instagram. I am happy to answer. If you have not entered the giveaway already, head over and do that now. Like I said, you get 10 times entry for just hanging out with me and sending me the code Crowd Control. Just to make sure that you tuned in, you know. I hope you enjoy the rest of this expo. There's a lot going on, and I know for myself, I will be tuning in to a lot of these events today. I'm super excited about them. But yeah, I I'm so happy to be with you guys today. Thank you so much for having me, and I hope you enjoyed this tutorial on how to make your own dice. Now, that is it for me. I now just have to cap these. I've got like probably 30 seconds left, but thank you so much for joining me. Like I said, I'm going to go ahead and cap these now, and I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you so much, Megan. Everybody jump over to her Instagram live after this and watch her finish up, and enter is it a giveaway? Is that what it is?
Yeah, so I have a giveaway on my page right now for a set of free dice. I'm paying shipping if you're within the United States. Actually, unfortunately, there's a lot of like mail issues going on with non-United States parcels.
Yeah,
I tried to ship out earlier to some.
Too.
Yeah, so I'm kind of stuck only doing US, but if you want, you're free to enter and get some free dice, and you get to pick the ink color after. So awesome. They're a little custom, I guess. Yeah.
Everyone jump over and check her out on Instagram and do that. And if you have any questions, she's also been in the Discord, and you can at her in there. I'm sure Megan
most
can
definitely
people from there too. So
absolutely.
Thank you so much. It's been really awesome to watch. It was like the camera setup was actually great for us to really be able to see you pouring the molds and everything. So it was really perfect.
Awesome. I'm glad that worked out.
All right, cool. Well, thank you very much. And I'm going to sign us off now.
Sounds like a plan.